Hey, this is the video lesson for 2.5, and we are going to be comparing fractions, decimals, and percents. So on this page, we're going to start with just fractions. I want you to make sure you follow all directions and pause the video when need be. So let's get started with number one. Number one says, fill in each circle with less than, greater than, or equal to make a true statement. Now there's lots of things you could do to compare these fractions. You can estimate, you can find common denominators, you can change them to decimals, you can change them to percents, but I'm going to show you an easy trick that works with just when you're comparing a fraction to a fraction. So let me get ready. I'm going to get a little workspace here. So we're comparing 5/8 to 7/12. So I'm just going to cover up the way the book did it because they do common denominators. So whenever you're comparing two fractions, if you remember back in chapter 1, we actually did what I'm about to show you to see if two ratios were equivalent, and it's called cross products. So here's what it says. If I multiply diagonally, 5 times 12 is 60. I write that up here. And 8 times 7 is 56. I can compare these cross products. So because 60 is greater than 56, that means 5/8 is greater than 7/12. Now the thing is, you have to make sure you start with these two and write that product above the first fraction. Otherwise, you'll get the answers all backwards. All right, so here's what I want you to do. And yes, you could use a calculator to get your cross products. I want you to work on, you're going to pause the video and do A, B, and C. If you want to do another method, that's fine, but I'm going to be going over A, B, and C when you're done with the cross products. So pause it, do A, B, and C, and when you're done with those three problems, restart it. Go ahead. All right, let's see how you did. So in A, I'm going to start by multiplying my 2 and my 9, which is 18, and my 3 and my 4, which is 12. So 2/3 is greater than 4/9. Let's go to B. So starting with my cross products, 5 times 8 is 40. That goes up here. And 12 times 7 is 84. That goes up here. Since 40 is less than 84, 5/12 is less than 7/8. And if I go over to C, so I do 1 times 18, and that's 18. Then I do 6 times 5 is 30. My answer is less than. All right, so that's how cross products works, and cross products is a great trick for comparing two fractions. But when in example 2, when we're ordering several fractions, cross products would be too complicated because it would take a long time. So the way the book shows it is to write each fraction with common denominators. So you can see they change seconds, 14ths, fourths, and sevenths to 28ths. And you can do it that way. If you are good with common denominators, you can do it that way, because I'll sometimes do it that way. But what I am going to do, basically for the rest of the lesson, is my trick is to change everything to percents, because we know how to do that. We're going to divide to change it to a decimal, and then we're going to deep to change that decimal to a percent. The only reason I'm saying I'm going to do that is because I think percents are easier to understand. So watch what I'm about to do in example 2. I'm going to cover up what they did. Remember, I don't care if you want to do it the way they did it. That's fine. All right, so changing them to percents. So here is what I know. I know 1/2. Well, 1/2 I already know 1/2 is 50%. So I don't have to do any math for that one. But 9/14, I don't know that off the top of my head. So remember, to change 9/14, and oops, it looks like I wrote 12ths, so let me fix that. It should be 14ths. So to change 9/14 to a percent, I first divide 9 by 14 and get my decimal. Now it's a long repeating decimal, but I'm just going to write down the first 3 digits, 0.642. And then I'm going to round that, or I'm going to move my decimal twice to the right. It's 64.2%, but I'm just going to round that to 64%. That's probably all I'll need. Now for 3/4, you can do 3 divided by 4 if you want, but you might be like, hey, I know 3/4 is 75%. That will save you some time. And then 5/7. Let me do 5/7 right here. I know this is going to be a crazy decimal because 7ths always are, or almost always are, so I'm going to do 5 divided by 7. So 5 divided by 7, and I get a big long decimal, but I'm going to just write down the first three digits, 0.714. I'm going to deep it and get 71.4% or 71%. All right, so here are my percents. Now, because percents are easy to understand, they're easy to put in least to greatest order. So the lowest percent, if you look at 50, 64, 75, and 71 is 50. So that means 1/2 is going to be my least. All right. Next, 64% is second, so 9/14 is second. Next, 71% is third, so 5/7 is third. And last, 75% is biggest, so 3/4 is biggest. So this is my answer in least to greatest order. All right, so remember, I changed everything to percents, and I used the percents to compare. Now, here is what I want you to try. I want you to try D on your own. So remember, you can change each fraction to a percent and use those percents to put them in to put the fractions in least to greatest order. So why don't you pause the video and give problem D a shot? Go. All right, let's see how you did. So in problem D, here are my fractions, and I have to put them in least to greatest order. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to write my percents underneath them. And any that you just know in your head might save you some time. So for example, 1/2, again, I know that's 50%. 5/6, I'm going to do 5 divided by 6. And I'll do that on my calculator. And if I do 5 divided by 6, I get 0.833. And if I move my decimal twice, I get 83%. So 5/6 is about 83%. 2/3, I have that one memorized because I know that's about 67%. But if not, just do 2 divided by 3. And 3/5, well, maybe let's say you don't know that one. So you do 3 divided by 5, which is 0.6. And then don't forget to add a 0 before you move your decimal twice to the right, and you get 60%. All right, so these are my percents right here, and they're going to tell me the order that I put these fractions. So starting with the lowest one, 50% is lowest, so this means this has to be first. I should have 1/2 as least. Next, 60% is second, so 3/5 is second. 67% is third, so 2/3 is third. And that leaves us 5/6 as your greatest fraction. So this should be your answer. Now, if you made a mistake, you want to think, did you mess up the percents? Or did you have the percents, but maybe you put them in the wrong order? All right, so that's what we do for those. Now, let's go on to the next page. Now, the good thing is, my strategy, change everything to percents, I'm going to keep using on this page. So as we get to this page, we're not just comparing fractions. We're comparing fractions with decimals and maybe throwing percents in there. And my strategy is going to be change everything to percents. Now, before we start, at the top, I want to point out something. This is a box of common fraction, percent, decimal, so that most of you should just know. Like, you should know when you see 2/5 that that's 40%, and that's 0.4. 1/3 is 0.3 repeating, and 33%. They're ones that you should kind of have memorized. And if you have them memorized, it's going to make your life a lot easier. But if you don't, you could be using a calculator to figure things out. So we are going to start with example 3. Now remember, for these I'm going to put least to greatest order, and my strategy is going to be change them both to percents. So let me get a box here underneath to cover up that junk, and let me start. First off, 3/4, remember 3/4 I do 3 divided by 4, which is 0.75, which is 75%. Now when they give me a decimal, I'm just going to deep it. Twice to the right, I get 70%. Because 75% is greater, 3/4 is greater. That's it. Remember, percents are easy to read, so that makes that a little bit easier. All right, so let's go down. Let me delete that box. Let's go down to example 4. Now, example 4 is more in a word problem. So let's read it and check it out. I'll circle things as I read it. So it says, Lucita made 85% of her free throws. So that's 85% for Lucita. Henry made 7/8 of his free throws. So he made 7 out of 8 of his free throws. Who has the better average? Explain. Now you can go through how the book has it, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here. So let me get my box ready. Okay. So first off, I'm going to start with Lucida. So Lucida, she made 85%. Now Henry made 7/8, so I'm actually going to change his to a percent. So Henry, who made 7/8, remember I do 7 divided by 8. And if I do that, I get 0.875. And when I move my decimal twice to the right, I get 87.5, but that actually rounds to 88%. Now let's say you didn't round it up and you kept it 87. It wouldn't affect this because 87 and 88 are both bigger than 85. So remember, the question says who has the better average? So now you got to think. In basketball, is the better average to make a higher percentage or a lower percentage? Well, you want to make a higher percentage because that means you made more of your free throws. So that means Henry, who has 88%, had the better average. So when it says explain, we're going to write that down. So we're going to say Henry. And all I would do to explain is say Henry made 7/8 or 88% of his free throws. This is higher than Lucita, who made 85%. And yes, if you are doing this from being absent, yes, I do want you to copy that because you need it as a model for when you do problems on your own. Okay, so I would probably pause the video to copy that, and when you're done copying it, restart it. All right, so now, here is what we are going to do. We are going to go down, and we are going to work on the problems below. So I'll tell you kind of what I want. I'll give you some options. Let's put it that way. So your options are, you could pause the video and do all 6 of these problems on your own and then restart it because I'm going to go over them. I'm going to go over them kind of quickly. Now, if you get stuck, let's say maybe you do the first 1 or 2 problems with the video and then pause it and do the rest. So it depends on how much you understand. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to change both numbers to percents each time. And when I do that, then I'm going to answer the problem. So right now, decide what you're going to do. And if you're going to pause the video, pause it now and do all 6 problems. Okay, get started. Okay, so now I'm going to go through these 6 problems here. Now, if you already did all 6 problems, make sure you're checking your work and you're following along. I'm going to go through them kind of quickly. All right, so in E, I'm going to change 2/3 and 0.6 to percents. So 2/3 as a decimal is let me use a different color, 0.666. When I move my decimal twice, it's 66.6 or 67%. Now 0.6, I just move my decimal twice to the right, and it's 60%. 67 is greater than 60. Okay, let's move to F. So I have 8/11ths, and I have 0.7. So 0.7, I'm just going to deep it and get 70%. Now 8 divided by 11 is 0.7272. So I write the first 3. When I deep it, I get 72.7, which rounds to 73%. And 70% is less. All right. In G, for 1/5, I do 1 divided by 5, which is 0.2. Now, I'm actually not even going to change them to percents because I notice 0.2 is the same as 0.2, so I already know they're equal. If you change them to percents, you should have 20% for both. Okay, let's go down to the next one. H, 42% versus 44/100ths. Well, this is already a percent, so I'm just going to deep this and make it 44%. 42% is less. Okay, I. So I have 7%. That's already a percent. Now 7/10, if I divide, is 0.7. And if I deep it, add a 0, it's actually 70%. This one tricks a lot of people. And 7% is less than 70%. If you had equal to, you got tricked. Okay, last, J. 6.5, I'm going to add my 0 and deep it, make it 650%. And this is already a percent, and it's equal. All right, so let me scroll out so you get a chance if you need to. If you had any wrong, I would probably pause it right here so you can look at your different answers and see what you messed up, all right, and understand it. If you got them all right, then you're doing great and you're ready to move on to the last page. All right, on the last page, in example 5, this is just a real world example, and they go through it in kind of a complicated way down here, which, I'm going to try to make it a little easier for you. So in example 5, it says, the table shows the school carnival attendance. Which grade had the greatest part of the class attending the carnival? So let's take a look at this table. We have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and 6th grade is a fraction, 7th is a decimal, and 8th is a percent. Well, guess what? I'm changing them all to percents. So first off, 5 divided by 8 is 0.625, which comes out to 62.5% or 63% because it rounds. 0.5, add my 0, move my decimal twice, is 50%. And this one is already 58.3%, which let's just say I round it to 58%, so I don't have to deal with that 0.3. So remember the question said which grade has the greatest part of the class attending the carnival? Well, that would be 6th grade because they have 63%, which is higher. So your answer is 6th grade. All right, so change them all to percent strategy. I'm telling you, it's going to make your life easier. So the last thing you're going to do is you're going to do problem K on your own. Now remember the question, I'll just highlight that, says which kind of ice cream do students prefer the least? Don't get tricked on this one. I'm circling something so you don't get tricked. All right, do problem K all on your own, and let's see what you got. Pause the video, do problem K, and when you're done, restart it to see if you were right. Go. All right, let's see what you got. It says Hiroshi found that 3/5 of his class prefers vanilla ice cream. So 3/5 prefers vanilla, and 26% prefers chocolate. So 26% is chocolate, and 0.14 prefers strawberry. Which kind of ice cream do students prefer the least? So I'm going to change them all to percents, which you guys know. So let's start with 3/5. Let me go, I'll switch it to blue. 3/5, if I do 3 divided by 5 is 0.6. Deep it, that's 60%. I'm going to write that here. So 60% of the class prefers vanilla. Now, chocolate, we already have a percent, 26%. I don't have to do anything with that. And strawberry, I have to move my decimal twice to the right, and that's going to be 14%. Now be careful. A lot of people are used to picking the biggest, and they choose vanilla for this. But it says which kind of ice cream do students prefer the least? And the least would be strawberry because it only had 14% of the class liking it. So hopefully you didn't get tricked by choosing the most. Hopefully you chose strawberry. And that's it for today's lesson. If you were absent, there's a good shot you have to do some of these problems below, probably 1, 2, 3. So make sure you're looking on your absent sheet. All right, I hope this helped. Later.